All right, Shalom. Just wanna recap. I just read out of the book basically saying that the Native Americans, that scholars agreed basically that the Native Americans and the natives of North, Central, and South America came from the old world. All right, or basically from the middle. They had to come from either Europe, the Middle East, or Asia. I mean, they came from somewhere. All right, so let me see something here. Okay, the Mayan history. Now the Mayans, I can't say that the whole Mayan Empire was just Zebulon, because they in reality the Mayans showed a lot of signs of Issachar behavior, especially their real strong fascination with time. But I would say by reading the scriptures and also reading history, I believe that I would say that the Mayans were a combination of the of Issachar and Zebulun. All right, and don't be surprised, because parts of Zebulun, parts of what we say is the tribe of Zebulun, some of those lands wasn't inhabited by what part of the Mayan Empire, but they were still the same people based on the prophecies. You know what I'm saying? So don't get geographical location confused with tribe. All right, but it says here, he declared that a Maya sculpture, that he is somebody by the name of Leplangion. That Augustus Leplangion, a French antiquarian and adventurer. It says he declared that the Maya sculpture depicted a scene from the Old Testament. Furthermore, he noted that a carved zigzag motif near a line on a Yucatan lintel gave ample proof that the Maya used the telegraph. He suggested that 1/3 of the Maya language was pure Greek, the dialect of Hammer, and found traces of Assyrian as well. So Hammer is going back in Greece. It's not, not one of the. I believe that he wasn't around the time of like Alexander. It was before, but also Assyrian. Why would they have Assyrian? They just came from Assyrian captivity. All right, so that's one piece of evidence linking the Mayans to the old world, as they called it. All right, so also page 14, among other provocative bits of evidence, Smith cited a ball court in the Maya city of Chichen Itza with its running motif of lotus blossoms, which was a traditional design in Egyptian art. All right, it says on a prehistoric monument at Copan, Honduras, Smith noted a carving resembling an elephant, an unlikely theme in an isolated Central American setting. So there was no elephants in the Americas. So how would, because you have to do a lot of critical thinking when you read history, how would people that are in the Americas where there's no elephants know about elephants? They drew elephants. All right. Just to give you just to show you evidence that they actually drew elephants. You can see the elephants right here. Look at that. See the trunk? Over here too. This is Mayan art depicting elephants. How, if people here didn't know shit about elephants, allegedly, right? Obviously they had to come from a land where there were elephants. Mind you, the Mayans, according to a little bit of history that I've read, are descendants from the Phoenicians. All right, the Phoenician Empire. Remember, the Phoenicians are the ancestors of the Carthaginians, who Hannibal stormed in a war against the Romans. He stormed on top of elephants. You know what I'm saying? Or he hit one of his military strategy was the use of elephants. You know what I'm saying? So elephants and Zebulon have history together, so to speak. So to move on, all right, to point the finger at the Phoenicians being the ancestors of the Mayans, right? There's more in this history book here. It says, nor would Egyptians be the most likely candidates because their ships were suited to river and coastal travel than to open sea. What that means is that the Egyptians' ships were not strong enough to make it from one end of the earth to the other. So you had to have a people that had a great shipbuilding abilities, right? So it says such a crossing would have been more within the known capabilities of the early voyagers of the great seas, the Phoenicians. All right, so if you're looking at technology, the Phoenicians had better technology to make it from one part of the earth, meaning the eastern hemisphere, to the western hemisphere. It says, unlike their less skilled contemporaries, so other people that were around at the same time as the Phoenicians didn't have the power, didn't have the skills that the Phoenicians had with ships, right? It says the Phoenicians built merchant ships that were mainly wind propelled, relying on oars when necessary. By 600 BC, the Phoenicians had ships that could carry 50 to 100 tons, making them equal in capacity to the Portuguese caravels of the 15th century. So if you're talking the Phoenicians, you're going back compared to it says by 600 BC, right? So that's about 1,900 years. Their technology for shipbuilding was 1,900 years ahead of its time, because it wasn't, you really didn't have anything until the Portuguese that was considered that great. All right, so moving on, page 17. Were the Phoenicians who practiced child sacrifice responsible for teaching this fairly unusual as well as shocking practice to the Gulf Coast Olmec? Does an Olmec relief carving depict an ancient Phoenician, since the figure is bearded and sports the upturned shoes worn in the eastern Mediterranean? Can the numerous monumental stone Olmec heads with negroid lips and noses be taken as proof that the Phoenicians brought along their black slaves on the lengthy voyages to America? Now, this is where the white man gets fucking racist. Basically, they're saying that the only black people would have been the slaves. The black Olmec heads, they said that those were slaves. By the way, this book is by Reader's Digest, showing these bastards are fucking racist. Why would you say that? But anyway, this is also a point that I'm going to make a little later. But this book cites other books, such as America BC by Dr. Barry Fell. It says, his America BC in 1976 and other works rely on inscriptions found primarily in New England to prove that not only the Phoenicians, but also the Celts, Arabs, Egyptians, and others ventured to the New World. Even though just previously it said that the Egyptians didn't have a strong enough sea presence, right? Now also there's something here that says the Paraíba stone controversy. In 1872, slaves working on a Brazilian plantation near the Paraíba River were reported to have uncovered 4 pieces of a stone tablet inscribed with unknown characters. A copy of the inscription, but not the stone itself, reached Dr. Ladislau Neto, director of the Museu Nacional in Rio de Janeiro, a national museum. After diligent study, Neto announced that the inscription recorded a visit to Brazil by Phoenician mariners centuries before the time of Christ. Now, reading on a little bit, it says, the text, he claimed, contained expressions and grammatical forms unknown to linguistic students of the 19th century. How, then, could forgers have produced such a text? Because they was trying to say that this shit was forged. But it was forged using grammar that these motherfuckers weren't, didn't know about. Like, what I'm saying? It wasn't something that was, known to them. All right, so it says, Gordon's translation reads in part, we are the sons of Canaan from Sidon, from the city where a merchant prince has been made king. He dispatched us to the distant island. We sailed from Ezion Geber into the Red Sea and voyaged with 10 ships. we were at sea together for 2 years around Africa. So although all this is not an exact science, like where it says we are the sons of Canaan, because what you have to understand is when Asher and Zebulon, because Zebulon and Asher both was historically speaking in Tyre and Zidon at this time, or at a certain time in history. When it says we are the sons of Canaan, it was really the Zebulon, the tribe of Zebulon and Asher identifying with the pagans whose ways they were following. But it says we were at sea together for 2 years around Africa. So this goes into the whole year and a half that it took to get here. This ship might have been lost its course or whatever, but it goes to show that they came from that region, right? So it says, then we got separated by the hand of Baal, because they were following pagan customs, and we were no longer with our companions. He dates the accidental landfall in Brazil to the 6th century BC in the reign of Hiram III, king of Tyre. So this clearly shows you, this is after 722 BC. So when you read, also you have to understand something. The migration to America, it wasn't all the 10 tribes just all came here at the same time, all together. You know what I'm saying? It was a migration. It was a few, a good amount of them made a life here, and then more of the 10 tribes came here. You know what I mean? With the Most High guiding us. Now going further into this book, page 18. It says, but other linguistic evidence has convinced him that the Phoenicians annexed Massachusetts perhaps around 400 BC. So they was already been here in this hemisphere for about 300 years by the time this happened. But they likely, according to scripture and common sense, especially if they came around Africa, likely they worked their way from south to north. So it will be realistic that later on in time, Gad or descendants of the Phoenicians settled in Massachusetts. All right. He has also listed links between Egyptian hieroglyphics and the written language of the Micmac Indians of eastern Canada. All right. So reading a little further, it says, the search is part of a well-established tradition. In the 18th century, Ezra Stiles, then Yale College president, argued that strange characters found on a rock near Dighton, Massachusetts, were Phoenician 3,000 years old. At an Indian mound near Tennessee's Bat Creek, a puzzling tablet found in the 19th century was adjudged by someone to be Canaanite writing dating back to the 1st or 2nd centuries AD. So again, there's been mass migrations. It's not like everything happened all at once. Now, also going into the fact that the Hebrews that came to the Americas, they knew about chariots and so-called UFOs and the aliens. Evidence of these visits by ancient astronauts, so-called aliens, is to be found in the art and legends of pre-Columbian civilization. So before Columbus came, people in the so-called Americas knew about so-called aliens. All right, it says Quetzalcoatl was, of course, one of these ancient astronauts. In a relief at Palenque, Mexico, Eric von Daniken is very prevalent in the UFO field, sees the carved figure of an extraterrestrial visitor seated in his rocket rather than the typical depiction of a Maya nobleman long accepted by many eminent archaeologists. In a secret tunnel in Ecuador are golden treasures, so this is Asher now, crafted by cosmic gods, which he suggested should not be photographed for fear that the flashbulb would set off a synchronized laser beam booby trap at the collapse the site. Statues of Toltec warriors at Tula, he claims, hold ray guns of advanced design, not spear throwers as scholars had previously thought. So these things are misinterpreted by scholars, but I'm going to go to the next video.